Okay, hi everyone. I thought I'd just do a painting of fish, or just maybe just talk to you guys about some fish, and just kind of a little bit of a focus project maybe for this week, and then maybe next week we could look at some other things. I'm finding that in this time, the art is really helping me just to calm down and just be a bit more focused on something else, which is really nice. So I've just got this image. I've got a couple of images actually. I've got this image of someone else's painting off the internet. I just typed in trout and this image came up, and I thought actually that's really beautiful just to play with colours. So we're going to do that today because it's just a bit expressive. Any adults could do this, or children, sort of, definitely at key stage 2 level, maybe also key stage 3 and upwards. And then I've also got another image of a different trout, which hopefully you can see there as well. And that is something that we can focus on with drawing, doing some mark making with some fine liners and biros and stuff tomorrow, and also doing some pencil work. So that's kind of the focus for this week, and that hopefully will give everyone the opportunity to have a go at trying something new. So you'll need like watercolours this week, and pencils and fine liners and so on. So I've stretched a piece of paper here it's a cold press watercolour paper, 300 grams, and it's with some gum tape that I've stretched it with, but you don't have to do that. If you're thinking I don't have watercolour paper, don't worry, you can use just some normal cartridge paper, some heavyweight paper would be fine, or just give it a go on some normal paper, just try what you've got. What I'm going to do first of all is just loosely sketch out the shape of the fish before I go into painting, and that's just helpful because it will just give me a rough guide as to how sort of dark I should go in some places and so on. Just going to make that a bit wider, sort of coming in. Like so. And you can just draw in, some of the sort of details slightly as well, such as the eye. I'm drawing this very, very lightly. Now hopefully you guys are able to see that. I'm using a 5H pencil. I just find working with a H pencil, especially with watercolour, is better because it comes out much lighter than if you use a HB. So that's just something to bear in mind. Again, don't panic or worry if you don't have a H pencil. If you've only got a HB or just an ordinary standard pencil around the house, then that will be more than fine. Okay, so when it's slightly dry, then just put a bit more on and do it that way. I've made up a little bit of blue, okay, in my water palette, and I've got that ready with some water, and I've used the 2 blues in my palette. So it's the ultramarine and the kind of more turquoisey blue here. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's this one here. So I've used those 2 together, and I'm just going to use a square paintbrush. So it's one of these, it's slightly thicker paintbrush to then put on my wash. This just helps you get a slightly flat wash. Just going to wet my brush. It's really important that you make sure the brush is nice and wet. And that's just going on really nicely. So just going to make a bit more colour. Those of you that have come to my classes, this is one thing that I always end up doing when I'm doing a demonstration, is I'm running out of paint midway. So make sure that when you guys do this, that you have got lots and lots of paint mixed up ready before you start to do your wash. That's a bit better, a bit darker. I'm just going to go all the way. Get a little bit darker in some of these spaces. I'm not going to go over the whole of the fish either. I'm just going to come around and sort of into the fish like so, a bit more water on the brush just to help loosen that. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and then I'm just going to use a round tip paintbrush. I've just dabbed off the excess water onto the paper towel. I'm just going to neaten that edge around the fish's mouth slightly and around here. So it's just neatening that up a little bit and just paint that along there. Okay. So it's really important that you start off with your lighter colours first. So if you look at this image here, there's lots of yellows coming through, and obviously some areas where we're just leaving completely white. So it's quite an expressive piece. You can be quite free flowing with it. So I'm just going to get some yellow, some of the lemon yellow, but what I've got left in here is kind of like a nice kind of greeny effect after my children have used these paints today. So I'm just going to get like a lemony yellow, and I'm just going to loosely start painting in the inside of the fish. If I go over into this area here, I don't know if you can see, there's still slight sheen of wetness in there. So it's just really important, because if I go up too close to that edge, it's just going to bleed. So actually I'm just going to start off at the moment with the bottom half first, because I don't really want that to start bleeding up there. So I could start by putting in some of this colour, defining in some of the shape of the mouth. And I'm using a number 10 paintbrush here, so I'm using quite a big paintbrush. It's important that you kind of think a little bit about how much pressure you're putting on. So if I put a lot of pressure on the paintbrush, I get a really fat line. If I take the pressure off a little bit, I get a much thinner line and thinner again. So it's really important that you think about how you're holding the paintbrush and how thick to go with that. So I'm just going to see if that's getting a bit dry now. So that haze is starting to go. So whilst I'm looking at it, you're not getting that sparkle as much, but there's still a bit there. So I'm just going to leave that a little bit longer. I can just paint into this bit though, so that's okay. And just come down a little bit on there. Around the eye. So you start off with your lighter colours and you're building up those layers. And sort of a wet on wet technique almost with this as well, because some of the colours are kind of blending into each other really nicely. So you guys can have a play with that in a bit as well. So all I've done there so far is just my yellows. I'm now going to add in my sort of next kind of colours, which I'm going to go for some of these reds, because again, still at the top here, it's still a bit wet just on the outside, on the background, so I don't really want to get that smudge, and you can kind of see where they've done it a little bit here, sort of smudged in through. Okay. So I'm going to get some of the lovely sort of cerise red, some of this, and mix it with some of the orange there. So I'm just starting to now add some of the red, and you can see you're getting this lovely bleeding to some extent of the red and the yellow kind of coming through, and you can be, you know, quite expressive with this. kind of let the water and the wetness of the paper do a bit of work for you in that sense. And don't worry, you know, I've gone slightly into my yellow there, not a problem, because I'm going to go over that with slightly darker blue, so that will be fine. And if you're really worried about it, what you can do is you can use a bit of your paper towel and you can just blot that off. So, you know, just to show you, you can just blot that off, so it's not a problem. And you can start to see the fish is starting to come to life. I'm just going to use some of the slightly darker yellow, the ochre, or the not the ochre, sorry, the sort of sunset yellow. Again, I'm just going to water that down, take the bit of the excess off there. It's very loose, kind of working in this way, which is brilliant. It's just actually really enjoyable. I'm just kind of letting the colours do their thing on the paper. And I'm just going to paint a bit more in the mouth there, because again I can go a bit darker over the top with that, which is fine. So this top edge is now looking dry enough for me to put my greens on. So I'm actually going to take a bit of the pre-made green, so the sort of leafy colour green here, and I'm going to add a bit of some of these blue. Okay, so I've used some of this green here, sort of more of a turquoisey green, mixed with some of the ultramarine here, and then I've also used some of the sort of leafy colour green and mixed it with some of this turquoisey blue and this green. So kind of got a mixture of green of different colours, and you can see that in my palette. So I'm just going to start off with this slightly kind of in between the two, and again I'm just going to take that stretch all the way along here. And you can just start to see that now I've added this on, your picture is starting to come to life a little bit more, and that's because you suddenly got now a little bit of depth into your picture, a slightly darker tone, and that helps the piece come to life. And I'm going to put some of that kind of greens and then some of those blues kind of coming down here. And sort of spreading around the mouth. And you're getting this kind of lovely sort of bleed happen where the colours are kind of intermixing whilst where it's still wet, and you can just slightly neaten that up. going to add a bit more water onto that brush just to help that transition a bit better. I'm just going to use some bits white here. Again, that's kind of quite important to leave areas that are white. Notice that I haven't completely covered the whole fish yet. I'm just going to add a bit more blue, the ultramarine blue, you can see there, into the mix with a little bit of this red. So you kind of got this lovely purple tone kind of coming in, again sort of submerging there. Just sort of play really. I think that's quite important to just have a little go and kind of see what works and what doesn't work. So it's slightly darker on the underside here. So I'm just kind of doing some slight shadowing there, and sort of the gills, a sort of suggestion coming up and through. And you can start to see how you can start creating a really beautiful piece of work just from just having some fun with some colours really. So I've slightly used the darker tone here, this darker blue, so the turquoisey blue, and just letting that disperse. I'll put some more of that colour coming up here. So I'm building up the layers, so I'm not being too quick there. I'm just going to put some of that yellow, lemon yellow, coming up in between some of this as well on the fin. And just help that blend in a bit. Well, it's not bleeding too much, sorry, because it's dry, which is actually what I want. I don't want it to kind of go too far in. I'm just going to put a bit of green mixed with some of that yellow and just bring a bit of that sort of edge coming down a bit. I'm just going to make up a slightly darker colour because I need to put some shadow and tone into the eyes and the face, and I need to put some darker tones kind of coming up here and through for the details of the spots. So I'm just going to make up a slightly darker tone. You can do that by adding your brown, a bit of the blue and a bit of yellow and red. I mean basically all three primary colours make a really dark brown which you can use. I don't have black in this because you can actually create a really dark tone from those colours, so you don't actually need it. So I'm just making that up. So you can see I've just literally added the dark blue, the cobalt blue, and so these two opposite each other, those two there. I'm just going to put in a bit of that detail coming in. I need to come back to the eye and put a bit of blue in that, on the mouth. So you don't want to be too neat, so this is quite a challenge for me, because I would say this is something definitely for when I was younger as well, at GCSE level and A level. My teachers would say, Gemma, it's being too neat. I guess the nicest thing is just to kind of let the colours do. It doesn't matter, you know, if your colours aren't quite the same as this, doesn't matter. You still end up with a fish that looks good. I'm just going to go a little bit darker at the foot here and just add a bit more bold colour in there. So that's just literally straight from the palette. And I feel like I need to do that in some other places as well, just to kind of get that colour coming through. Oh, that's a bit too dark. If that happens, then just go over with the water. I'm just flicking some details in there. And I just want to get maybe a little bit more darkness coming through, so I'm just going to add a bit of that darkness that I made to a bit of that cerise kind of colour, so it's a bit more of a dirty sort of red just coming through. And I'm just going to wet the brush and just help that just come in and disperse a little bit. I'm just going to do the same down here as well. And just help that edge. I'm not quite happy about that edge, so I'm just going to go over with a clean brush and some water, and just to help that smooth down. Okay, so I've got a small paintbrush, it's a size 1. I'm just going to just put in slight darkness around the eye. and just kind of come in a bit round there. Now it's at a point where I'd say just let's leave it to dry for a bit, just because there's some areas where I do need the black, or the not black but the darker brown that I'm putting on, just to not disperse and get more of these kind of lovely little dots that you can see, and the same with the red. So I'm actually going to leave that to dry for a bit, and then I'm going to come back to it and put a little bit more detail on, and I'll show you that in a second.